Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I want to talk more about the Kirtland Temple because there's more to talk about. I was recently just talking to Jen Stevens from Christian Fire Poppy channel, and we were just talking about all these different things. She's done a video about the Kirtland Temple, so I would encourage you to check that out. I'll put a link for it in the description box below. And she was talking to me about the fact that exactly a year ago, her and I, as she was starting her channel, which I can't believe that a year's already gone by, but when she was starting her channel at this time of year last year, we were talking about the Kirtland Temple, and we were talking about it in this video. So I'll put her video about the Kirtland Temple in the description box below, as well as the interview that we did. By the way, this is me a little over 40 pounds heavier than what I am now. I'm steadily losing weight, coming close to the 50-pound mark. But anyway, I don't look like this anymore. But this was a great, excuse me, this was a great interview, so make sure to check it out. And yeah, we're going to go over some of the things that we talked about and a few other things that I have on my mind. So before we do, let's first remind ourselves really quick of how we lost the Kirtland Temple. If you go to the church website to church history topics, this is what it says. Threats and violence and other troubles led church leaders and many saints to leave Ohio for far west Missouri. The relatively few saints remaining in Kirtland continued to worship and congregate in the temple. After Joseph Smith's death in 1844, most members of the Kirtland congregation embraced the quote-unquote new organization, a movement that eventually became the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or RLDS, led by Joseph Smith's son, Joseph Smith III. In 1880, so by this point, the saints had been in Utah for a while. In 1880, a court recognized the heirs of Joseph Smith as those holding title to the building. And 2 decades later, the RLDS Church, later Community of Christ, secured ownership through a legal claim of continuous use known as adverse possession. Community of Christ has cared for the building since that time, well, up until now. That just recently changed, and they need to update this part of the website. Okay, so essentially we lost it through this legal battle. I don't know. I don't know much more than what it says here. I'm not going to dig that deep. But the fact that it went to court, I would assume that maybe our church tried to take the temple back, but we lost. I don't know who was contending over it, but it went to court, so whatever. But we didn't end up with the temple, right? And so we've had this era, right? This period of time, like most of this dispensation has gone by without us having the temple. It was only at the very beginning when Joseph Smith was still alive, right? And we've been talking about, the passing of eras lately. You may already know that I have this spreadsheet where there's been all these like really weird, interesting deaths that have been occurring of people that represent eras and nations and religions and, these like big, powerful figures. For example, the first time that this even got on my radar is when Queen Elizabeth II passed away, because just like the Kirtland Temple, that had been the status quo my entire life, is Queen Elizabeth. She was always there. And the day that she died, it was surreal for me. I couldn't imagine not having a Queen of England and it going to Charles and having a king, right? It was so strange, but it happened. Now, around the time of her death, well, the day after her death, President Nelson had his birthday, and with that birthday, he became the oldest prophet or apostle of this dispensation, if you're going by years, not months and days, but just by year. So that was kind of weird because Queen Elizabeth was the longest reigning British monarch and second longest reigning sovereign worldwide behind French King Louis XIV. So it's almost like if you look at that, you think about this worldly figure, rich, powerful, influential, right, according to the current world order. And, just like all people and nations and stuff, it goes the way of the earth eventually. It's not destined to last forever. But what is destined to last is the church. And President Nelson would be like a symbol of the church, how it's continuing on. Well, around this time, just a couple of weeks before, Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the longest living leader of the Soviet Union, he passed away. Before that, a few weeks before that, Shinzo Abe, Japan's longest serving prime minister, passed away. So we're looking at Japan, Soviet Union, the UK, the church. And then a little bit after that, it was China. Xi Jinping, longest living president of China and leader of the Chinese Communist Party. And there's a bunch of others. Notably, let me just point out the really notable ones. You have Pope Emeritus Benedict the 16th. He was the longest living pope of all time, and he died on New Year's Eve of 2022. A few weeks later, Lucille Randon, the longest living nun of all time, passed away at the age of 118 years and 340 days. And now we're starting to have American figures that represent the different branches of government that have passed away. And the one that I'm really waiting on is Jimmy Carter, because he's the longest living U.S. president. And I feel like he's probably going to be the end of this series. But you've had all these other nations and organizations and whatever. You have the European Union, Jacques Delors, the architect of the modern European Union, longest serving European Commission president. So I feel like what's going on here is kind of like this symbolic ending of these eras. And pretty soon it's going to be Christ that's here, and he's going to be king of the world. And we're going to have a new world order in Christ. And so as we're thinking about the Kirtland Temple, I was talking to Jen Stevens. We were talking about the fact that it feels like this is the end of an era. The end of a time when we were powerless to do anything about this situation. This is the first temple of this dispensation. And frankly, I think it means a lot more to us, theologically speaking, than it ever did to the community of Christ. Maybe it meant something before they became Community of Christ, when they were the RLDS and they were more literal with their beliefs. But there was that schism in the 80s, and the people that were more literal and had more dogma, they broke away from the church, and now they're just a loose grouping of congregations, the restoration branches. And what remains, the Community of Christ, is essentially a very watered down version of what it once was, and temples don't really mean anything to them. Linda L. Booth, the former president of the Council of the 12 Apostles, when I interviewed her, she basically just told me that they're like a beacon of hope. That's what they are. Not that they're anything particularly special. They're a way to focus your spirituality or something like that. So having this come back to our church is highly, 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 highly significant. So it's the end of the era of this not being in our possession. The time has finally come where we were able to take this back, and it's back where it belongs, right? Which is perfect. It's a perfect thing to happen just before the millennium, because I think that the second coming is sooner than later. So it's fitting that this would happen. And I'm hoping that the church will maybe renovate this area, make it look, not that it looks bad, but see if we can make it look nicer. There's like these cracks and stuff in the walls. I don't know if something can be done about that, but just make it look a lot better and just kind of like restore it a little bit better. I know that the Community of Christ was having a hard time keeping up with its maintenance, from what I understand. And it'd be great if we could do something about these telephone poles and wires that go right in front of the temple. I don't know if something can be done about that. Maybe if the church, I don't know. I'm not I'm not in a position to offer the church's money, but I wonder if the church would ask the city of Kirtland if like maybe we could move some of these telephone poles to the other side of the street, because this just looks horrible. But anyway, so the end of an era, and now, we have this back within our power, in our possession, right? Okay. Also, Oh yeah, it reminds me of the Rome, Italy temple because that was a significant temple to be established and dedicated. President Nelson called that temple and its dedication a hinge point in the history of the church. And even though we never had a temple in Rome, it's obviously very symbolic and very important because the Catholic Church it's headquartered in Rome, specifically in the Vatican, which is within Rome. And essentially they've been in the seat that the church should have been if it hadn't gone into apostasy. They're essentially the ones that took over. I realize that you have the Orthodox, like Eastern churches and stuff like that, so you can make a case for them, but more so Rome has been like the central power in the one that kind of inherited what would have been the true church, if that makes any sense. Like those members that were part of the church after it had gone astray and time had gone by, it became the Catholic Church. And now we have this temple in Rome, and it certainly was a hinge point. So we have that temple. We're now in possession of our very first temple, the first temple of this dispensation, the first temple since Book of Mormon times. And in the Old World, the first temple since the second temple was destroyed by the Romans. So it's highly significant. Now, I got this email from Jody Brockhausen, and she says, notable, no coincidences. And in the subject line, March 25th, 2020, temples shut down. March 25th, 2024, Kirtland Temple officially opens. Yeah, remember, we've talked about this before. So on March 25th, this communication came out from the First Presidency. First Presidency temporarily closes all temples. And it says at the end of the day on March 25th, 2020, that's when all temples worldwide were going to close down because of the pandemic. It was a victory for Satan. It was a victory for evil. They were able to shut down all temples worldwide and put a halt to the work of salvation that's done in temples. To me, that's the significance of that. I feel like if there ever was a time, like a height of Satan's power, I think it was 2020. He's still very powerful today. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of sin, a lot of wickedness. But as far as like scoring points against God, in actually throwing a wrench into the work of salvation, this would have been that time, when he successfully stopped the work of salvation in temples or halted it temporarily, right? And so he had his time. He did what he did. The world powers did what they did. We went along with it. We closed down the temples and other things. Missionary work kind of came to a standstill for the most part. And then 4 years later, 4 years later, responsibility and ownership of sacred sites and historic documents transferred to Church of Jesus Christ. So we got the temple back, but the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints plans to reopen the Kirtland Temple March 25th, 2024 for public tours at no charge. So it's like the first day that it's going to be open to the public is going to be the 4-year anniversary from when all the temples closed down. I agree with Jody. I don't think that that's a coincidence. Thank you, Jody, for sending this to me. So again, 4 years ago, what I think was probably the height of Satan's power. 4 years later, as I think we're getting closer and closer to the second coming, and when there's going to be a transfer of power from the world to Christ as king, we have this happen where now we scored 4 years later, and we got the Kirtland Temple back where it should be. It's been missed. Many people have come to visit the Kirtland Temple, but it's been under the ownership of Community of Christ. I mean, you see their thing right here, their sign, little history of the temple, and then at the bottom, Community of Christ. This is going to change. Excuse me. So highly, highly, highly significant. And then, of course, there's the fact, and I don't know why I didn't say this sooner. I should have said this like the very first video that I did, but don't you think it's pretty significant? We've been looking at these eclipses. Everyone's been pretty keen on the eclipses ever since 2017 when you had the first eclipse, right? Let's just do this in order. Okay, let's turn off these two for now. So you had the eclipse in 2017, just a few months before President Nelson became president of the church, and the path of totality went over New Jerusalem, right, in Jackson County, Missouri, Independence, Missouri, far west, which was once headquarters of the church, and Adam-on-Diamond. And it took the one path that it needed to in order to include all of these, because you can see Adam-on-Diamond is on the far northern extreme of the path of totality, and Independence is on the southern end. So there couldn't be much variation from this in order for this to happen, right? At a time where other Christians were also looking at this eclipse and found significance in it, they weren't necessarily seeing significance in it for the same reasons that we did, because they don't care about Independence, Missouri, far west, and Adam-on-Diamond. What they were paying attention to was just the fact that this went over the United States, and then that you have this one coming up this year in 2024, makes a big X over the United States. Let me just show that really quick. Gosh, if I can navigate this a little bit better. See, big X. But there was a big, there was a big deal made about the Salems that are in the path of totality, which I think it's significant, but they were claiming that there's 7, and there's not. There's this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there's a couple that are close to the path of totality, like this one. Let me turn on the borders and places. Which one is that? That's Tennessee. For some reason, they don't count Salem, Tennessee, but they count the Salem, Missouri. I don't understand. I feel like it was kind of shoehorned, but I think that there could be significance to it, but not nearly as much significance as the fact that the eclipse goes over New Jerusalem in Adam-on-Diamond. And then just a few months ago, we had the October 14th, 2023 eclipse. And this eclipse, I think, is also very significant specifically to us, members of the church, because it went through Utah, but it went through it took the one path through Utah that would miss the maximum number of temples. In fact, at the time, there was only one temple that was in operation, the Monticello, Utah temple. The Manti temple was under renovation. I believe it still is right now. And then the Ephraim temple is not even constructed yet. So very interesting, because, if it had gone just a little bit more south or more north, it would have hit more temples, but it didn't. And I'm not going to pretend to know what the meaning of that is, but I see that it's unlikely that would happen. Utah is full of temples, except for this section right here where nobody lives. Okay, and then let me turn temples off. And then we have the eclipse that's coming up on April 8th, which is the day after conference. And it's going to go through, or it's going to go over the Sacred Grove. It's going to, where God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared and the restoration began. Fayette, New York, the first headquarters of the church and where the church was established. And then significantly, the Kirtland Temple. And it's going to go over the Kirtland Temple just a month after it came back into our possession. That is so, the fact that this happened before the eclipse should really, really highlight the significance of this eclipse and these other two eclipses. They in my mind, they all go together. And yes, the world realizes that there's something to these eclipses. There's the Christians that they're like, oh yeah, look at the Salems and look at the Ninevehs. The Ninevehs is another one where You have a few, okay, let me turn off the church sites. You have a few Ninevehs that are in the path of totality. You have, looks like two, and then other ones that are kind of close, which I still think is, it's significant, but not as significant as these major church sites. When it comes to Nineveh, we think about the story of Jonas, and during the lifetime of Christ, when he was being asked for a sign of his divinity, he said that the only sign that he would give to the Pharisees and Sadducees would be the sign of Jonah, which was essentially Christ being resurrected. And the thing is, I think sometimes we think that story is over, that, Christ was crucified, he was resurrected, and then he showed himself to people after his resurrection. But he's going to be showing himself again to the Jews at the second coming. He's going to come to Jerusalem. He's going to be on the Mount of Olives, and they're going to see him. They're going to see the sign of Jonah. So I do think that this could be significant. It's just that you only have two of the cities that are actually in the path of totality. But anyway, excuse me. So you have other Christians that see significance in the eclipses, and that's really good. The Lord works with them too. We have the Jews, like on Israel 365, they noted this eclipse that went over Utah because this happened 7 days after October 7th when this war started in Israel. So they found this eclipse significant. But us as members of the church, we should find all of them significant because of where they go over. The fact that they kind of like they're like bookends to President Nelson's presidency. Now, again, I don't know how long he's going to be president of the church, but he had the first one just a few months before he became president, and then you have this one that's coming up right now. It feels like things are wrapping up, but I guess we'll see. So, I don't know. This is just the newest, most interesting and strange happening when it comes to these eclipses. We already thought it was significant that it was going over the Kirtland Temple, even though it was in possession of the community of Christ. But now, a month before the eclipse, it's now ours. We own it. Holy cow, that is crazy. So, and then just a couple more things. So March 25th is on the Hebrew calendar. It's Shushan Purim. You can pronounce this different ways. Purim, whatever. Shushan Purim. Okay. Purim is the day before. Shushan Purim is celebrated in Jerusalem. Let me tell you what Purim is really quick. Let's go to Chabad, and it gives a little explanation. Celebration of Jewish deliverance as told by Megillat Esther. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. This isn't Chabad. That was hebcal.com. Okay, Chabad. What is Purim? The jolly Jewish holiday of Purim is celebrated every year on the 14th of the Hebrew month of Adar. Purim 2024 begins on Saturday night, March 23rd, and continues through Sunday, March 24th, extended through Monday in Jerusalem. So the day that the Kirtland Temple is opening to the public, under our ownership, it's going to be on the day that Jerusalem is celebrating Purim, where you have this extension in Jerusalem. It commemorates the divinely orchestrated salvation of the Jewish people in the ancient Persian Empire from Haman's plot to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, infants and women, in a single day. Literally, lots, quote unquote, lots, in ancient Persian. Purim was thus named since Haman had thrown lots to determine when he would carry out his diabolical scheme, as recorded in the Megillah, or Book of Esther. Let's just read through this really quick. The Persian Empire of the 4th century BC extended over 127 lands, and all the Jews were its subjects. When King Ahasuerus had his wife, Queen Vashti, executed for failing to follow his orders, he arranged a beauty pageant to find a new queen. A Jewish girl, Esther, found favor in his eyes and became the new queen. though she refused to divulge her nationality. Meanwhile, the Jew-hating Haman was appointed prime minister of the empire. Mordecai, the leader of the Jews and Esther's cousin, defied the king's orders and refused to bow to Haman. Haman was incensed, and he convinced the king to issue a decree ordering the extermination of all the Jews on the 13th of Adar, a date chosen by a lottery Haman made. Mordecai galvanized all the Jews, convincing them to repent, fast, and pray to God. Meanwhile, Esther asked the king and Haman to join her for a feast. At a subsequent feast, Esther revealed to the king her Jewish identity. Haman was hanged. So he was digging a pit for the Jews, and then it turned around on his own head. Haman was hanged. Mordecai was appointed prime minister in his stead, and a new decree was issued granting the Jews the right to defend themselves against their enemies. On the 13th of Adar, the Jews mobilized and killed many of their enemies. On the 14th of Adar, they rested and celebrated. In the capital city of Shushan, they took one more day to finish the job. And so therefore, if you live in a walled city, and that's basically just Jerusalem. I'm not a Jewish person, so I don't know, but Jerusalem for sure, you do the extension. So it's an interesting story. We were talking about the changing of hands of ownership, in talking about the Kirtland Temple and the ending of these different periods of time and the transfer of power, right? The transfer of power, which we're going to be seeing pretty soon when Christ comes. So there's a lot of different symbols in this story. Like Esther she's a queen, she's a bride, right? And basically it's the king that saves her and her people when he finds out who she is, and he has the power to save them. That's what Christ is going to have when he comes. He has the power to save his people. He's going to literally save the Jews from warfare and extermination as you have the war of Gog and Magog going on. And, he's going to save us too, because persecution is going to rise and the world is becoming more and more hostile toward those that want to live a righteous lifestyle, right? So he's going to come, he's going to save all of us. But on top of that, when he brings in the millennium, it's the church, it's the saints that are going to rule the world with him. So you could see this story as a foreshadowing of the second coming and the millennial reign and the downfall of these evil characters and the wicked of the world, right? Later on, there's one more thing I wanted to share. Just a few interesting things. In modern times, the plans of some of our nation's worst enemies have been thwarted on this day. In the early 1950s, Joseph Stalin, the ruthless butcher of millions of innocent people, had bloody plans of dealing with the Jewish problem, quote unquote, in the USSR. Just as things were reaching a crisis point in 1953, he died on Purim. In 1990, Saddam Hussein of Iraq defiantly invaded nearby Kuwait. As pressure ramped up from the international community, his army began firing Scud missiles into Israel. The Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem M. Schneerson, repeatedly assured the people of Israel that they would be protected. After the U.S.-led forces attacked Iraq, they were quickly victorious, and the hostilities ended on Purim. Right? So we have this coming up, the Kirtland Temple for the first time since the beginning of this dispensation, opening up to the public on Shushan Purim, the extension day for Jerusalem. And I feel like there's probably something to that. And then just a couple weeks later, like exactly 2 weeks later, that's when we're going to have the eclipse. That's going to go over the Kirtland Temple 2 weeks after it opens to the public and 1 day after conference. So, oh my gosh, things are so intense right now. There's going to be more that I have to say about the Kirtland Temple, but I think that's going to be it for this one. So again, make sure to subscribe to Christian Fire Poppy. She puts out a lot of good content. I think that if you like my stuff, you'll like hers as well. We think a lot alike. And then make sure to watch these couple of videos. Her video about the Kirtland Temple, because there's gonna be things that she talks about that I haven't. And then you can go back to that interview that we did a year ago, talking about the Kirtland Temple. So, okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.